Hello, everyone. This is Ditu Kasuyi with Urban Financial Services Coalition and the L2L Leadership Institute. We are excited to bring to you this special session that is hosted by Urban Financial Services Coalition, sponsored by the L2L Leadership Institute. And this is the last session of the Urban Financial Services Coalition Empowerment Week, the virtual Empowerment Week. And we have had a wonderful week. We kicked off the week with the Banking and Economies Forum that was hosted by the Federal Reserve Bank banking system, and 700 individuals around the country participated. I think it's 800 participated in various sessions at the Fed virtually. And then we had our Toastmasters virtual vitality session on Tuesday. And at that, we talked about behind the mask. You know, some of us come to work with a certain mask on, and we wanted to go behind the mask. And then on Wednesday, we had holiday cooking with the chef. We talked about getting our holiday game in gear. Yes, we wanted to get our holiday game in gear. We had 3 particular items that we worked on for the menu. Actually, the YouTube is out there. If you want to up your game for this holiday season, you can check us out on our Urban Financial Services Coalition's YouTube page. And then we sponsored the Make It Stick session at the Banking and Economy session on Friday. We talked about people create a post-form strategy to turn their insights into actions. You got to be intentional. If you want to, you can hear all the good information, but if you don't do anything with the information, it's like not hearing the information at all. And then we end the week with this inclusive empowerment. How can you be an inclusive leader so you can empower your team and maximize your impact? And I'm so happy I have my good friend, Miss Adrian Whitaker, with me. Adrian, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yes. And Adrian and I, we met through Urban Financial Services Coalition. And so we have a strong relationship with the organization. And we often say that the organization has been instrumental in our development and helping us go to the next level. And so with that, we say welcome. And what I would like to do very quickly is I'm going to, for those of you who may not be deeply know about Urban Financial Services Coalition, I am going to show you a short clip about Urban Financial Services Coalition. And then I'm going to have Adrian talk a little bit about the L2L Leadership Institute. And then we will get on to our session for today. So just one moment, and we will have our Urban Financial Services Coalition commercial.
Success is achieved through valuable connections and maximizing opportunities. For minority financial professionals, this once was elusive, but Urban Financial Services Coalition affords the opportunity to network and collaborate with minority financial professionals from across the nation. Started in 1974, UFSC is a group committed to being the best at their profession, living their best life, and giving back to their community. UFSC knows that closing the wealth gap starts by building their own wealth, sharing their expertise and wealth-building strategies with communities of color, and by helping minority professionals effectively market their unique skill sets and match them with employers who value diversity. UFSC is building a legacy by preparing and developing the next generation of minority professionals. Learn more about the connections and opportunities UFSC offers at www.ufscnet.org.
right. If you don't know much about UFSC, please visit the organization at www.ufscnet.org. And I'd like to throw it over to my colleague, Adrian Whitaker, to tell you a little bit about the L2L Leadership Institute.
Thank you so much, Ditu. And I am a proud product of Urban Financial Services Coalition. I do want to say about L2L Leadership Institute that it actually started off because of a partnership between myself, Ditu, and UFSC. So several years ago, I believe now it's been 8 years ago, Ditu and I decided to start doing these Live to Lead conferences. And we did them as development conferences, largely for our fellow members of UFSC, but also for the community at large in Richmond, Virginia. The conference brings in about 250 people. That first year, we were surprised that we sold out in the very first year, and it has sold out every year since. In the past year, we did move the platform to virtual, and we'll continue in virtual through the pandemic. But from the Live to Lead conferences, we decided to not just have a once a year event, but to provide ongoing leadership opportunities to develop leaders, particularly leaders of color. And so that morphed into us doing a monthly L2L Leadership Institute mastermind session where we bring people together to learn leadership skills and to share best practices. We also host other cultural activities, and we host other events to develop ourselves and to develop our community.
All right, thank you. So, Adrian, now that we've told them about us, we want to hear about them, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself amongst yourselves in a breakout room. So we're going to do breakouts. So what we would like for you to do in your breakout session is to share your name, your organization, and your superpower. You know, tell us what your superpower is and how do you leverage that superpower. Now, you're not going to have long. You know, you're only going to have about 5 minutes for this particular breakout session. So please use the high-level elevator pitch approach to your introduction. So name, organization, and a superpower. And I am going to create your breakout rooms. And all you will have to do is to click on the link that's associated, that comes to you. And then make sure you have, I'm gonna give y'all a little more time. I'm gonna give y'all 5.5 minutes to be able to do it. You're welcome. I know you was thinking it's like, oh man, only 5 minutes, 5.5, I'm giving you that much time. So now you can be excited about that. So with that, please click on the links, and that will take you to your breakout room for your introductions. Just click on the link. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody enjoyed your breakout rooms. If you had a good breakout room and you liked some of the people in your breakout room, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up if you liked the folks in your breakout room. You thought they were nice. You thought they were phenomenal. All right, I see some thumbs up. Okay, it was great. And y'all got a chance to talk about your superpowers. So go ahead, if you don't mind, throw your superpower in the chat. Let's see what kind of superpowers we have in our group today. Let's see what kind of superpowers folks have, so we will know what kind of superheroes that we are dealing with. And so with that, while you are throwing that in the chat, let me quickly tell you what we're going to talk about today. One, we're going to identify what diversity and inclusion, we're going to kind of identify what it is, kind of define it for all of you. And for a lot of you, you probably already know what it is. We're going to give you some additional definitions for clarity. And then we're going to talk about why is it important for personally and important for business, especially as a leader, right? So we're going to identify what diversity and inclusion are, right? And why they're important for you as a leader and why it's important for the business. And then we're going to pinpoint the characteristic of inclusive leadership. Now, one of the things that we focus at the L2L Leadership Institute and Urban Financial Services Coalition and Toastmasters International is about creating leaders. And so we want to be the type of leaders who are influential, but also the type of leaders that are inclusive. And then we're going to talk to you about some strategies and help you develop a plan to find your appropriate leadership style that is inclusive, or things in your leadership style that you may want to take to the next level to make your leadership more inclusive. So those are the three things that we will cover today. And Adrienne, anything you'd like to share before we kick off
Yeah,
and do our first exercise?
Yeah, Ditu, I would like to take a little time just to give a little bit about, we shared a little bit about urban financial services and we shared a little bit about L2L leadership, but I do want to share a little bit about ourselves, you and me, Ditu, as facilitators, so people know why this topic is so important to us on a personal level. And so first I want to say that I know that perhaps there might be some people who are watching who maybe you are watching from a place where you can't see us, or you may not be able to see us clearly. And so I want you to know that I'm an African-American female. I have curly hair. I'm in my home office on a beautiful sunny day in a well-lit room. And my journey around diversity, equity, and inclusion really is a personal one for me because I'm from a second generation family that immigrated to America. And we are a multicultural, multi-race, many genders, sexual orientation, and religions. My experience comes to the table because of some of the work that I have done. So I was a senior vice president at a bank where I was in charge of several things, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. I worked as a vice president at a historically Black college. I worked as a vice president of a not-for-profit that provided services to youth of various abilities, including a special focus on LGBTQ youth. And then I worked for an organization where we advocated for individuals with disabilities. And now I serve as diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for an agency that is primarily focused on bringing equity around housing. And Ditu, I know that you bring to the table the other half of this wonderful conversation, a lot of experience on leadership. Ditu, I can't hear you.
There you go. And for me, my name is Ditu Kasuyi. I am an African. I am an African, and I identify as African American here in the United States often. And I am wearing a suit with my nice blue shirt. And I am in my office, but I have a virtual background that has the Urban Financial Services Coalition logo. And I'm often connected and associated. People often confuse me for Denzel Washington, the young Denzel. Yes, the young Denzel. And I do have my glasses on. And my background is deep in leadership. And I've been in several leadership organizations, in a leadership role in organizations, everything since high school, but I've also been formally trained in leadership development in terms of financial services industry, went through so many leadership development programs, certified in leadership and helping leaders become leaders through the Franklin Covey Leadership Institute and through the John Maxwell Leadership Institute. And I'm also certified in change management. And I also work for a government agency where we focus on developing a workforce of 750 individuals throughout the world. And we focus on how do we make leaders better. And so this whole concept of inclusive leadership is another aspect of becoming a phenomenal leader. So not only do you have to lead yourself successfully and lead others successfully, you want to create an environment that's inclusive. And then we have a whole nother session that we'll talk about another time, is the leader that is technologically competent, because you also need to be able to leverage technology in this world that we are living. So that's who we are, and we're excited about talking about inclusive leadership today. Anything before we jump into what are inclusion and diversity, Adrian? Anything else?
No, right. Go right ahead, Ditu.
All right. We are going to go and do an exercise. So if you have paper, I would encourage all of you to, if you have paper, to bring a piece of paper out. And we are going to do an actual exercise. It's called your identity circle. Your identity circle. This is the exercise that you're going to do. This is what we would like for you to do, either on your piece of paper or just think about it in your mind, right? Is to draw a circle in the middle of your page, right? That's you, right? And then we want you to draw, 3 to 4 other circles, right? That make up your other types of identities. Now, all of us have different types of identity. You might say, hey, I'm African. Some people say I'm Caribbean. Some, whatever that is, you can choose whatever you like. Whatever types of identity, you might want to say, you're a parent, you're a grandpa, you're a grandma, right? You might say your role as a business person, whatever it is, your profession. So you determine whatever your identities that you would like to have and just draw them back to you. So you can draw 3 to 4 or 5 circles. And then after you have driven those circles, what we would like for you to consider and think about in those, pick one of those identities and think about, when have you been the proudest you have felt about that particular identity, right? And then the second thing that we would ask you to think about is, when was a time that it was difficult to have one of those identities, that you had some challenges and some oppositions that made it difficult to identify or to be associated with that identity. So give you a moment to think about that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give you about 6.5 minutes. And in your breakout rooms, we would like for you, if you feel comfortable, share with the group, that proudest moment and that most difficult moment. And, and if you don't feel comfortable, it's okay. You can change the name. You can change the names of the individuals, who are involved, so you can protect, the innocent or not so innocent. But you can share in a way that is most comfortable for you. So the point of this particular exercise is to identify times that we feel really good about our identity and times that we don't. Okay, so we are going to throw you in your breakout rooms. First, any questions on the activity? We're doing the identity circle activity. Any questions? All right, hearing none, we're going to give you 6.5 minutes to share, and then we'll come back and debrief your thoughts. So here we are. And all you have to do is click on the link, and we'll meet you back here.
Ditu, one of the roles that I'm most excited about having been selected and chosen to be in is I am an ambassador and a servant of God. And that's with a capital G, a capital O, and a capital D. And one of the proudest moments in that particular role was sometimes when we have tragedies in our own lives. I had lost my only son, not realizing that God was setting me up to help other people who lose people in their lives. And I was speaking to a young lady that was working for me at the time. I was her manager. And in a very short period of time, she had lost her mother, her husband, and her daughter. And I called just calling to encourage her, and God had a whole different agenda. And I sang and prayed and prophesied and ministered to her, only for her to call me 2 weeks later to tell me that she had planned on taking her life that particular day, but God used something as insignificant as my words and the little time that I gave to her to give her the hope to keep on living. That's the kind of a thing that I live for, is to make that kind of a difference in people's lives in whatever capacity God would see me to be able to make impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Red, thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful way, right? We have roles that people identify with us and connect with us. And that one of the ways that we are able to add value when people appreciate that role that we play. And then we have roles where folks identify with us, and we often might have some pain, right? And we may have some friction, or there may be some stereotypes that are associated. Is there anyone that would like to share one of their roles where they may have had some pain or some friction that they encountered? And those of you who are not sharing verbally, you can put yours in the chat. Is there anyone like to volunteer? Raise your hand, and we'll be happy to let you share. Anyone that had a role that they identified and they had a little pain or some friction.
I'll share. Oh, somebody else raised their hand.
Ms. Brown, Anissa?
Yes, my role is family, or what I identify with. And, that's something that we have, all of us, I'm sure, is a work-life balance. But there was a time my identity was work. And at work, I put off seeing my father when he was ill because I was working. And he passed during that time frame. And then it helped me bring back to reality what was important, that it didn't matter what I did at work if I didn't have the family and what was so important to share it with. And so it made me prioritize. And so now, whatever comes up at work, as long as it's in line with my identity family, then I can do it. But I won't allow myself to get that imbalance like I had before, where it becomes everything, or putting things above what matters most, because there won't ever be that peace of mind that I was hoping to find in the work or secular type world. It just doesn't afford that. So I learned that from that experience, and my identity now, or has always been, family.
Absolutely. Anissa, thank you for sharing that. One of the things as leaders is that we may want to consider. One, having our own priorities in line and clarity around that. That also sets the stage for others. And as leaders, do we want to create an environment where people feel comfortable, know, and understand that their family, their personal families, is just as important as their work family, and that they know that they can do the work and don't have to choose between their family and work, because they're all together as one. And that's one of the important roles for all of us as leaders. So thank you all for sharing. I appreciate you all sharing. And those of you who shared in the chat, thank you for sharing. And Adrienne, as we transition this topic, I throw it to you.
Great. And I believe you're going to put up some slides for me, so I will wait a moment. And I really do appreciate that the conversations that we are having, because, we're going to go a deeper dive into definitions and about diversity and equity and inclusion. But it's these conversations where we realize that in so many ways, we have so much in common, and we have so many shared experiences. Ditu, thank you for bringing up the slide, and I am ready. So to ground our conversation before we get into the conversation about inclusive leadership, we're going to ground our conversation in understanding some things about diversity. And, when I began in this work years ago, I actually was in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion for my region in the Richmond market when I was a banker. And back then we just called it diversity. We had not evolved to the DEI. We were just diversity. And so the definition of diversity is a pretty simple one. It is, people who have different various backgrounds and experiences. So it's a simple definition, but if only it was that easy. Ditu, please go ahead. Next slide. So when it comes to diversity, it's, the various things that make up who we are, our ethnicity, our age, our abilities, our responsibilities, our education, social economic background, our culture, our job, our sexual orientation, all of these various work experiences that bring us to who we are. And this makes up our identity. And so even within ourselves, there's so much that comprises our identity, our perspective, our points of view, our biases, and all of this we bring to the table, as does everyone else. And when we all come together, then that's diversity. But not necessarily the goal that we're trying to achieve. Next. So inclusion, I remember when years ago, we began to add diversity and inclusion, because diversity enough, that wasn't enough. I remember we were doing diversity training back in 2000. So that's now 21 years ago is when we were first doing our diversity training in my first institution that we were focused on it. And we realized that diversity by itself did not achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve. And so this other part of inclusion, a lot of times people use diversity and inclusion as if they're the same, you can interchange them, but they're different. And so we're going to focus a little bit on inclusion. So inclusion is when everyone feels they have a voice. They feel that they can be themselves, they can be authentic, they're part of the decision-making process, and you feel a sense of belonging because you can bring your authentic self to the table in the workplace. And I should add a caveat, within reason. And the reason I say within reason is because, yes, be your authentic self, but be that authentic self that your mama and your grandmama and your auntie had raised you up to be. So always polite, but definitely your authentic self, bringing your full experiences and opinions to the table. That's very different than in diversity, because diversity is the mix. It is everyone is here. But inclusion is everyone is valued. And Ditu, next slide. And so when we're talking about diversity means not just it's the mix, it's the bringing people together. And now you got, okay, all boxes are checked. It is that sense of belonging that means that everyone is part of who we are and what we will do. Some people say diversity is like coming to the party. You get the invitation, you get to go to the party. And inclusion is that you're a member of the planning team. A little bit. It also means that you have influence and power. It means that your voice is just as important. Regardless of where you fall in the company, it's just as important as all of the other people that make up the entity that is your workplace. Next. So equality. So equality is something that we're striving to attain. And people use the word equality very loosely, but at its core, equality is about sameness. It's about everyone having the same. And when you think about equality in that view, through that lens, it doesn't quite feel right. Equality means we treat everyone the same. Well, the reality is not everyone starts on the same playing field, Not everyone starts at the same place in the race of life. So if we treat everyone exactly the same and try to breed sameness, we're not going to actually achieve equity and equality. So giving everyone the same treatment, the same supports within the workplace is not going to produce the best result for them as individuals, and it's not going to produce the best result for you as a manager or for your organization. You have to look at the individuality of the people on your team, and you've got to feed them that which they need in order to be successful. And because they are different, they will need something different than the person in the seat next to them. Next slide. So when we realize that not everyone's the same, and when we treat everyone the same, as wonderful as that might sound, it doesn't get us to equality. We realize then that we've got to take into account that every person on the team is an individual. And we've got to give ourselves time and space as leaders to have an understanding of who the people are on our team. And we have to learn about them and learn what do they need in order to be able to fully participate and to provide to the overall greatness of the team. Everyone wins in that situation. The individuals win, of course, because they get to have what they need to be successful. You win when my team is doing well and all the members of the team. That's how I advanced through the company, quite frankly. It wasn't because of me alone. It was because of the wonderful teams and the individuals on the teams that were able to provide their greatness to the whole. And then the organization also achieves. This is where mentoring comes in. This is where leadership and development programs come in. These types of programs, these types of mentoring, they have to be individualized for the individuals who you're trying to bring up and along. Next slide. So we've learned a little bit about diversity. We learned a little bit about inclusion. We know that they're not exactly the same. And we know that the goal that we're trying to reach is equality. So Ditu, I can't see the chat from the big screen here. So can you take it? And I think we have two questions. The first question is, what do you think the advantages of encouraging diversity and inclusion in business? What are the advantages? And if you can pop that into the chat, and Ditu, if you can tell us what you see, and everyone, I want you, every single person, to pop in at least one thing that would be an advantage of having diversity and inclusion in your workplace. Oh, they're popping up.
They're popping up. You see it? Okay, you good?
I see creative, new perspectives, well-rounded solutions. Yes. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Increased retention. Yes. Keep it coming. I need 3 more. I'm not going to move. I need 3 more. Good morale. That's 2. Oh, that's 1. Give me 2 more. Excellence. Overall excellence. And trustfulness. I like that word. Increased income. I'm going to dig a little deeper into increased revenue and profits in a minute, because at the end of the day, we do know that in business, it is about business, and diversity, equity, and inclusion are tools for success when it comes to business. And I did see retention. Ditu, I think we have another question. So let's pop that next question up. What would happen if we only encourage diversity, but without inclusion? So we encourage a diverse workplace, but not an inclusive one. I need three comments here. I'm not moving. Ditu, you see anything? Ah, there we go. Disengagement, absolutely. Lack of creativity. Just checking the box, high turnover. Missing out on contributions. One of the reasons, a lot of times when I'm talking to groups, particularly groups that are of the majority, that don't have a lot of diversity in them, they will tell me that it is difficult to retain top talent, minority talent. And I always ask the question, I always say, well, talented people want to work somewhere. So you've got to ask yourself, why don't they want to work for you? And what are the things that you are doing that makes them feel like this is a great place to work? When you become a leader that begins to think that I want every person on my team to feel as though this is a great place to work for them as an individual, then we're going deeper into trying to be inclusive. Ditu, next slide. So I mentioned we're going to lean into some of the advantages. So attract and retain top talent. Check, you got that one. Employees are more engaged, market expansion, more customers. We didn't quite hear that, but we heard about increased profit and better reputation and a stronger brand. We all have been aware of organizations that brand has suffered because of a reputation of not being inclusive. In today's world, people want to align themselves with organizations and with entities, whether it be from my buying power or from where I work. They want to align themselves with organizations that have a reputation of being inclusive. And from a global perspective, that's where we're going to be able to be more competitive and get into more markets. We're going to be able to identify more customers. We'll have more ideas and talent that come to the table. And so this is a win opportunity. This is not just a feel good. This is about business success and leveraging the best resource that you have in any business, your people. Next slide.
Hey, Adrian, can I add here?
Absolutely.
I think this played out really significant in the past 2 weeks with the NFL. The NFL a couple of years ago, took a very hard stand around Colin Kaepernick and him taking a knee, right? And so they had different types of reaction, people that were with him, people that were against him. The NFL had a really tough time, dealing and finding a space with that. And even they came up with solutions, right, where they didn't even involve the players at all, talk about lack of inclusion, right? And as a result of some of the things that they came up with, they had to backtrack. And then George Floyd happened. Yeah. And then they had a significant shift, with that. And so now when you go to a game, on the back of the uniforms, on the back of the helmets, end racism, right? They have that as a part of their brand. They have women referees. Now they have a couple of players who've come out and say, I'm gay, right? As a player, they came out and did that. And then you have a coach, right? You have a coach who is saying those opposite things to powerful people in the NFL. So now they have a disconnect between, one, they evolved to get to this point, but then they have this disconnect of folks who are not aligned with what the image that they're trying to project or the workplace that they're trying to have. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Ditu. That's a perfect example. And here's the reality. Any organization, any company is going to spend a lot more money in trying to rebuild brand than you will ever spend in creating the positive brand in the first place. It takes a lot more time, energy, and money to recover from not being inclusive. And the reality is, when you have practices that are biased, you will spend more money to try to recover, but the stain of that reputation will never go away. And so you can spend billions of dollars and people will still say, but do you remember? Next slide. And Ditu, I believe this is an exercise. So I'm gonna hand it over to you.
All right, this is a video that we're going to show, kind of recaps, the importance of diversity and inclusion. And so this is entitled From Insights to Inclusion. So please enjoy this clip.
Very short, so you can't get up.
When I go in for an interview, I usually see the facial expression, "You're not what I expected," or "Oh, you don't look how you sound." Based on my last name, they're expecting a Caucasian person, and in comes me.
I didn't even have a chance because I had an email address with an AOL on it. The employer just saw that and thought, oh my God, the woman's old.
She started asking a little bit more personal questions and then just flat out asked how I was doing with the ladies.
As a teacher, I always teach my kids to include everyone. But for some reason, as adults, we've lost that.
The data on more diverse teams is absolutely irrefutable.
In terms of your revenue, your earnings, and in terms of how successful you are as a business.
Data is only great if we can turn that into insights and do something meaningful with it.
I think one of the most damaging phrases in history is that we've always done it this way.
If you hire an employee and they don't see people that look like them in leadership in the organization, they're not going to stay in the organization.
If you can't see it, you can't be it.
I don't necessarily want to fit in. I want to be the best. I want an opportunity to shine. And I want to do something that hasn't existed before.
Don't hire me because I'm a box to check off. Hire me because I'm the best person for the job. I can't change my race. I can't change my sexuality. I can't change who I am, but I can change the way that I treat people.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable and be willing to do the work.
Diversity and inclusion is not an HR problem to solve. It's not a talent acquisition problem to solve. It is something that the organization really needs to mobilize around at every single level.
Be yourself, and you will draw the same people that have the same interests as you, and you don't have to be fake. Now that I'm actually able to walk into a professional work setting and be myself comfortably, I realize that I'm not monitoring every step I make. I'm actually there and flourishing as an employee.
We're just as ambitious, just as motivated, just as driven, and just as hungry as anybody else.
The challenge is finding the great talent. It's like a needle in the haystack. And so if somebody could help us find that needle, that would be amazing.
Wow. Who doesn't want to be the type of leader to help find that needle in the haystack, that opportunity that is available to all of us? There are so many underutilized individuals on teams. And not only on teams, I also believe that there's underutilized people in families. I think there's underutilized peoples in churches. I think there's underutilized people in Urban Financial Services Coalition. I think there's underutilized people at the PTA. There's a lot of untapped talent and energy and power and horsepower that if we become more inclusive as a leader, we can be able to tap into that level of engagement. So, Adrienne, anything else you'd like to add before we close out the foundational piece of our presentation and go into talking about what we can do as leaders to grow?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add, Ditu, is that I'm hopeful that, in UFSC, we look at diversity and equity and inclusion through the lens of who we are as members of our organization. And I would say to us as an organization, as we're in our workplace, that as African Americans, we are part of a marginalized group. But within our organizations, there are other marginalized groups. And that's why I like that video, is that it opens our eyes that as we try to bring change about in our workplace, when we're thinking about true diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're thinking beyond our own identification and looking at the identifications and the marginalization of other groups and trying to bring equality to all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrian. You bring up a excellent point. And as we continue to work and evolve as an organization, and as we have those conversations, we find, if we spread the love, right, and share opportunities, and as we start to identify other identities, then we can start to attract and deal with the issues.
Yes.
And so that's why we want to focus with all of you on at the level where you are as an individual. And I like to say that all of us are leaders, and I use the definition that John Maxwell uses, is that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And that means that we are all leaders because we all have influence. So whether we have official authority, that means that we're in a leadership position, right? So when you're when you have authority, you have a different set of responsibilities. When we are not in a leadership authority, that means we leverage not the authoritative role, we leverage influence to be able to make change. And the question becomes, are we going to use that influence for good? Or are we going to do nothing with that influence? Or are we going to use our influence, for things that doesn't add value to the company or add value to the people that we spend our time with? And so I hope that most of the folks that are here with us today, that they're focused on using their influence for good. So here's my question to all of you, and I'd like for you to, put this in the chat. What are some of the characteristics of an inclusive leader? So, you've been around, you've worked with a lot of different folks. Let's start to put in the chat, what are some of the characteristics of the leaders that you have found? We got open-minded. Thank you, Aisha, for putting that in the chat. We have very good listener. Ooh, that's such a powerful one right there. Accepting, very good traits. Anything else? What are some of the leaders that you have felt were extremely inclusive? What were some of the characteristics? Madam President says transparent. When we have transparency, that's a big thing that makes leadership very inclusive. Trustworthy. That is also something that is extremely helpful, to creating an inclusive environment. That a leader that takes the time to teach, that don't just tell, but takes the time to teach. That's excellent. Samuel says, an acknowledger of the gifts in others. That is also an excellent trait. So thank you. You've covered a lot of the inclusive leader traits. Let me give you a couple that we have, for your consideration. I will skip by this exercise. Here's the traits. One is that they have a commitment. Not only a commitment to do the business well, but they have a commitment, to making sure that everyone is involved. They have a commitment to adding value, not only adding value for themselves, but adding value for others. We all have had leaders that they are only interested in what makes them good. And sometimes that's to the detriment of the organization, or sometimes that's at the detriment to the individuals that they work with. An inclusive leader has the courage. Sometimes it's easy to say nothing, especially when folks, maybe folks are not doing what they're supposed to do. And we don't have the courage to tell them that, you know what, that presentation that you did, it was good, but here's some things that you may need to improve upon. That's one of the things I love about Toastmasters International, is that Toastmasters International, they focus on helping leaders give good evaluations. And a good evaluation is balanced. It tells you the things that you did extremely well and want you to keep on doing. And Toastmasters teaches you to give them feedback that inspires them to push to another level. I used to call people used to have what they call grandma praise. Grandma praise, you go to church, You sing in the choir and you have that first little solo. You're not really good, but grandma's like, oh, thank you. You did so good. You did so wonderful. Everybody just cut and say you did so wonderful. And then you get that head like, oh, maybe I could start my own, I can make my own album. I could start making this a career. No. It's the hold up. Hold up. So we have to have the courage, to tell folks, the truth. Not in a way that demeans them or says that they have less value, but to share the courage to tell folks, what they need to do to be able to grow and go to the next level. And then also, sometimes people think that things will just go away. They see that people may be treating people a little differently. And it's like, it will just all work out. We invite leaders, especially inclusive leaders, to deal with the hard issues. Call things or call people into the office, or when they see conflict, deal with conflict and not ignore conflict. The other trait of inclusive leaders is to recognize that they have bias. We all have bias. Every one of us has some type of bias. And so we're invited to consider to figure out what our biases are. Because once we understand our biases, then we can work to negate those particular biases. Some of our biases are helpful, some of our biases are not helpful at all. And oftentimes we have biases that come from our background and our experiences that end up showing up in how we lead and how we treat people and how we work with people. And so when we identify, those types of biases, right, that have a negative impact or that is not in line with the way we feel now or not in line with what we're trying to accomplish, then we make an adjustment to that. And that's why it's important for us to consider to have a good, strong network of folks who are able to give us feedback, especially in our blind spot. We got 2 eyes that see in front of us and we got 2 ears on the side of us. So that's when we want to leverage the folks that, people on our team, that we create an environment where folks can tell us stuff. They can tell the emperor if he or she does not have any clothes on, right? And then we have good friends and mentors and sponsors who can also tell us the things that are in our blind spot that might be getting in the way of us as leaders. The other part of inclusive leadership trait is curiosity. Are we curious? Do we want to learn more about other people and what other people have, what value other people can bring to the table? What type of talents do they have? Or what type of things that interest them? More about their background, not from the perspective of being nosy, right? But from the perspective of having the person, knowing who the person is and what they're interested and how you can position and help them to be successful, or, to make a connection, with them. We can have that when we're open to learn new things. And we won't automatically say, you know what, I already know everybody. I know everything about everybody who's from the Caribbean. I know everything about anybody who, comes from a certain background. No. We want to be open to curiosity to learn more and learn, how that shows up for that person and how that connects to the business, how that connects to who they are, how that connects for our opportunities to work together. The other part is cultural intelligence. A lot of us spend time with people that we either grew up with or areas that we're comfortable, and we may not have had a lot of different type of experiences or may not have experienced a lot of different cultures. And as you travel and as our companies become more global, there are more cultures in society, in our workplace than it's ever been before. And so we want to have some level of cultural sensitivity and cultural intelligence. I worked for Department of Defense and they sent me a lot of different, places around the world. And one of the things that they would always do, especially if we had to negotiate, with a particular vendor or contractor, we would have to read this course on what are the cultural customs, when you go into the Philippines or into Korea or into Japan. So we would want to follow, right, the cultural customs as appropriate We wanted to know when to bow, when to shake hands, right? All those things is part of the cultural intelligence and helps to create an environment that is extremely helpful. And then it's collaboration. Collaboration is not telling everybody everything. It's sharing what is the concept and what the idea, and involving everyone else into the conversation so that maybe we can come up with a solution that we couldn't think of by ourselves. It's also saying, hey, how can we solve a problem, not with just only me solving the problem, but everyone collectively working together to solve the problem. When we think about leadership, leadership is getting things done by leveraging the unique talents and resources of other individuals. That's when we create synergy, right? That's when we are moving to a higher plane. One is too small of a number to do anything significantly by yourself. Great leaders have the talent and the ability to collaborate, partner with other folks to be able to move the ball forward and do things that they can't do individually. So these are the 6 traits of inclusive leaders. So I'm gonna stop here and see, what are your thoughts about these particular traits, and which one of the traits that you think that you have a strong superpower around. So you can put that in the chat, which one of these traits, 6 traits that you have a superpower around. And then, if you're feeling really good, you can say which one of the traits that you think you may want to grow to the next level. And so I see we have the Urban Financial Services Coalition National President, Ms. Ola Mae Truelove. Hello, Ola.
Good morning, everyone. How are you all?
we are great. And I think one of your superpowers, Ola, is that you have the power to motivate and get everyone involved. I think you are an awesome collaborator. One of the 6 traits of an inclusive leader.
Well, thank you, Ditu.
All right, I see there's a question in the chat. Question: was there a correlation with the red and the green circles? No, there's not a correlation between the red and green circles. Thank you for picking up on that, Aisha. It's really close with the colors, right? So we were trying to have a color mix between the green of the L2L Leadership Institute and the burgundy of the Urban Financial Services Coalition. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Dr. Red has said, Ola, you've mastered all 6 of the traits, And Keisha said her superpower is on collaboration, absolutely. So a lot of people in the group can resonate with those. I haven't seen much where people have said which one of the 6 traits that they need to take to the next level. As they think about what they're trying to accomplish in the next year, or when you think about the environments that you are currently working in, which one of the traits that you are still developing as a leader? Is there any more space to go to the next level in terms of commitment? Is there any more space to be more courageous? What type of issues that you may have seen been going on in the office, but you haven't that willingness to deal with it, to address it or talk about it. And maybe it's at home. Sometimes we have issues at home or in our families that we see the way certain people in our family are treated, but people talk about on side, but it doesn't never really get addressed. Or maybe it's in our nonprofit group, or maybe it's in our church family. Maybe there's some folks who need to learn more about what is bias. If you don't understand what bias is, how can you identify your own biases and understand how those biases may be playing out in your relationships, in your decisions about, where you choose to eat, or what type of people you recruit, or what type of parties that you come up with for your team, or type of things that you do to have fun. That could be an area that you may want to take to the next level. And then in terms of curiosity, we have folks on our teams that we spend a lot of time with. But what if you did a quiz and say, hey, the 10 people on my team, what do I really know about them? Do I know that do they have kids? Do I know who their partners? Do I know their partners' names? Do I know the things that they have a strong interest in? What are their passions outside of work? What are their favorite food? What type of things do they like to drink? I know these sound like small things, right? But if we become more curious about the people that we spend our time with, we might learn some things that we didn't realize. And then the cultural intelligence. I said that I identify as African. I'm often identified as African American, right? And so oftentimes, because people may not realize that I'm African, then people will say disparaging things about Africans that may not realize that, And so when we have that cultural intelligence, it's one of the biggest ways to make a deposit or make a connection on a relationship, is to understand another person's culture and then be aligned with that culture, to greet them in their culture. That when a person does that, that's like an easy way to connect. And then the last thing is, I think there's never, each level you go up in the organizations, there's more opportunities to figure out how to collaborate on a higher level. So these are the 6 traits. Adrian, I'm going to stop here and see if you have any thoughts that you want to add in terms of the 6 traits of inclusive leaders.
Ditu, I agree with all of them, but and I noticed that they all begin with C. So I am going to add another C. And the C that I'm going to add is creativity. And you touched on it when you talked about cultural intelligence. When I was at the bank, we used to have this team building exercise that we did forever when I came to the table. And it was a golf outing. And the golf outing was an outing that had all of the people from wealth managers came, everyone who was in commercial came, and all of our retail branch managers were all invited. I'm not going to say they all came, they were all invited. But because not everyone understood golf, not everyone enjoyed golf, there was a small group of people who always went, and this small group of people who always went on this team building activity over time were the people who tend to work better and trust each other more. And there were these other folks who were self-selecting out because that team building exercise was not inclusive for everyone. And so I knew I could not take away the golf tournament, the internal golf tournament. Everyone enjoyed going out and being on the out there, but I could be creative and I could change the rules. And so when I came on board, we had the golf tournament, but we changed it and I called it Wacky Golf. And Wacky Golf was, hey, it doesn't matter what you use to move the ball from one place to the other. You can use a club, a bat, you can throw it. I don't care. It's about coming out and being together. And then all of a sudden, people who knew nothing about golf are now playing and interacting and building relationship with people. And then unbeknownst to me, I've got guys who play golf all the time, laying on their bellies, treating the golf ball, the club, as if it's something for pool, like a pool stick. Everyone can let down their guard and participate. And really, when it comes to being a leader and an inclusive leader, it's about trying to have an inclusive environment where everyone feels as though, yes, I count and I matter.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Adrian. That was an excellent example. And we're going to add the C of creativity to the chart. And you really, as a leader, we're really encouraged and we invite folks to tap into one of their human endowments. Like there's 4 human endowments, and one of those human endowments is imagination, right? Or you can say imagination, creativity. And we ask ourselves that question, how can we be more creative to be able to solve the problems and create environments where we can get the most out of folks? And you gave us an excellent example of that. So now what I'd like to switch to is talk a little bit about the focus areas of influence. So as we think about, hey, we want to grow our leadership, we want to go to the next level. We want to make our organizations, better. Well, what can we do? And there's certain areas where we have control over. They often say, control the controllables, control the controllables. And so I'd like to introduce to you the 4 areas of influence, 4 areas of influence when you think about being an inclusive leader. And we always start with self. The greatest opportunity that we have to change things and change things as a leader is to start with who we are. Oftentimes, people want to change other people, and we can influence other people, but we can't control other people. So our greatest center of influence starts with ourselves. So if we want to be a more inclusive leader, there's a couple of things that we may want to consider doing. One is have some level of humility. Humility is one of those things to know that, what? I don't know everything. Ola, I just don't know everything. I don't know how to deal with the best way to deal with everything. And sometimes I am just going to mess up. And when I do, and people point it out to me, I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to do something different. But often when we lack that humility, we put people down, we don't accept feedback from other folks, and it just becomes a challenge. The other part is self-awareness, to be aware, of our own, particular, our own particular ways that we deal and do things, right? And there's some things that we do really well, and there's some things that we need to improve upon and get better. And then to be open to change, be open to going to the next level, be open to challenge the status quo, be open to challenge traditions that have always been done a certain way, and when people bring new ideas to the table, that we will say, you know what, we won't automatically say no. We'll learn a little more about what people are bringing to us, and then, make a decision, and then have the conviction to change. Sometimes we're presented with new information. Sometimes we see the results of what we're doing is not producing the results that we want, but we don't make the commitment to change. We just keep doing the same old thing and getting the same old result. And we know what that that leads to. That's insanity. Well, the next phase that we have is, as we work on ourselves, and especially we said leadership is influence, the next level is, hey, how do we work with other folks? And this is kind of the empowering stage. And as we work with other people, we look for equity. And Adrian shared this, is that equity is not equality. Equity is figuring out, what other people need to be able to take advantages of the opportunities that are available. That we want to respect them. We want them. It's just, I can say I respect Ola, but it's not enough to say I respect Ola. We want Ola to feel respected, right? We want Ola to say, you know what, Ditu respects me as the leader of this organization. He respects me as a woman. He respects me as a banker. So when she feels respected, she's going to give everything that she has. And then it's participation. And this is one of the, the focus on Ola today, but one of the things in working with some of your different colleagues there in Kansas City, Ola, one of the things that they say about you is when they come to the meeting, you tell them, I'm not going to let you sit in the back of the room. Participating in Kansas City is a contact sport. You got to be on the team. We need everybody on the floor. Everybody's going to get in the game. And so when we see folks that are not participating, find out what we can do to get them onto the court, getting them to play. And then the last thing when we talk about empowering people is really the customization, and you can't customize stuff if you don't know the person. I mean, those of us who are in business, especially those of us who've been in sales, you can't use cookie cutter sales approaches with everybody. You got to know a little something about them. That's why you kind of do that research, kind of know what their particular pain points are. And now you deliver the message that connects with them. That's also something that we learn in Toastmasters. Depending on your audience, you use different types of techniques and examples so that you can make the connection with them. And the next label is, so we have the self, then we have others that we deal with. And say you are in authority position, right? Maybe you're the president of the chapter. Maybe you're on the leadership team, right? Now there's another level of influence that you want to have. So are you making sure the team is connected, right? Is everybody on the team connecting and gelling and working together? That's the part that you're looking at, right? When we get together, is everyone laughing or is everybody laughing at a particular person, right? We also want to facilitate facilitate everyone doing their part and feeling that their part adds value. So as you distribute the work, as you distribute the responsibilities, as we involve people in solving the problem, right? Are you making sure that everyone feels engaged? And then there's confidence. There's individual confidence and then there's team confidence. So how confident is your team at coming up with solutions and coming up with ideas and feeling like they're a part, that we're going to do this thing together? Or, as a team, do we make commitments and we just follow through? We don't follow through on those commitments. We set goals, but we don't accomplish those goals. So we don't have a confidence that we can do something collectively together. And then you identify who needs coaching. And then the last level is really is about advocating in the organization. It's really, how do we, as an organization, take on this inclusive environment? And I'm going to throw it to Adrienne, and she's going to talk about, before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. This is going to be just a 1 minute break, a 2 minute break. And those of you, if you're welcome to join us on camera if you like for the break. It's just a stretch break. We're going to take a stretch break. Here's the first stretch. Go ahead and stretch your arms. Come on, Ola. Come on, Dr. Wakabongo. Stretch your arm. Get your arm stretching. Dr. Red, let's get that going. Stretch those arms. Okay, excellent. This is what you should do anyway every 30, 45 minutes. All right, here's our next exercise. Let's go over to the side. Get that going. All right. Excellent. Adrian, you're doing a good job. Dr. Red, you're doing good. Chanel, you're doing wonderful. Aisha, you're doing good. All right, this is the next level exercise right here. Let's get that leg up. Woo! Get that.
Don't start it, Ditu. Don't start it. We have on pajama pants. Don't do it.
Right.
Your left leg.
I already know we have on pajama pants.
Well, you don't have to show it, but put that leg up. Get that right leg up. Woo! Yes. Let's stretch that leg. There you go. Good job. Oh, here's the last one. All right, here's the advanced one. Okay. Get that.
Right. Let me see your leg, D2.
Yeah. D2 gonna get a whooping. That's what's gonna happen to D2. Melanie, get D2 a whooping.
That's the advanced exercise right there. Melanie's doing that one right now. So as we head in the home stretch, the last thing I would like to introduce to all of you is what we call the inclusive leader continuum, right? And so we all start at different phases of the continuum, right? And the first phase of that continuum is the unaware. We are not aware of our blind spots. We're not aware of how things may show up for someone who's visually disabled. We may not be aware of how things may impact women. You know, as a man, I may not understand that. I may not understand what it is for someone who is Asian American. You know, I may not even understand, you know, how it is, you know, for a person who's Caucasian. I may not be aware of that. And so one of our things that we're encouraged to do is to figure out, you know, what is it about ourselves that we're unaware of, so that we can start to learn more about that. We embrace that we don't know as much, right? And then we move to the phase that we become aware. You know, my wife and I, we adopted a young man. We had no idea about what's involved with adoption, or what's involved with young people who, you know, that haven't been adopted. But once we started on this path, we started to become aware of the challenges that are associated, you know, with adoption. Then we start finding that we have people that we've been friends with and connected with for years that have been adopted. We never knew that they were adopted individuals. So, you know, we went through the awareness, you know, cycle, right? You know, and as we become more aware, you know, then we're able to embrace and empower, you know, the folks that are in our network, because we can connect with them differently, you know, and that leads to activeness. You know, that's why awareness is one of the first things in terms of advocating, because you can't advocate for things that you are not aware of at all. You know, and then, you know, once you become active and you realize, you know what, I want to get other people involved in this, right? This is just, you know, whether it's outside of work, or once you're in work, you know, and you want something to be done, you say, hey, how do I get the rest of the team involved? How do I give them the tools that they need so that they can address this issue or be a part, you know, of the change? And then collectively, you start to advocate on behalf of folks, right, who are marginalized, who may be impacted. You know, Urban Financial Services Coalition was created because folks across the country wanted to advocate for minority professionals. That, you know what, we want to also be involved in the solutions. We also want to be involved in growing revenue. We want to be involved in taking our companies and organizations to the next level. We want to be involved in designing financial services products that meets the needs of the minority communities and all communities. We have something that we like to say and be a part of the table, you know, and that becomes from an organization perspective. And then the cycle starts all over again as we identify new issues and things that come about. And so with that, let's have Adrienne come back and share her thoughts about how we can be an advocate at work or in organizations that we're a part of. Adrienne?
Absolutely. Ditu, thank you for all of that. You know, when we're talking about being an advocate, and many times when you're within an organization, you might be in different types of roles. You might be in a role where you have authority. You're in the driver's seat. And being an advocate looks one way when you're in that role. But regardless of where you are in the organization or what seat you have on the bus, you can still be an advocate, because advocacy begins with understanding, awareness, and making sure you understand the policies that are in place within your organization. So as we go through this becoming an advocate, think about it from where you are in your journey, in your organization, or what role you serve. So it was written as if all of these are for people who have authority, but not necessarily. So the first one is encourage the company to give everyone, and Ditu, I've got to change my view. I just realized I am covering up the screen. Encourage the company to give everyone the opportunity to learn more about equality and diversity issues. And so if you're in the driver's seat, then that is you providing those opportunities. But you can also be an advocate by bringing resources like UFSC to your organization. Assess your organization's flexible working policies and policies and processes. Assess them as a leader and assess them if you're not in leadership so that you can be aware, so that you can bring up ideas for change. Ensure that people across your organization have regular opportunities to provide feedback or are included in how they feel. And, you know, for us, where I work today, we do a employee engagement survey. And I had the opportunity as a new employee, and I understand it was because of my role, but I got the opportunity to introduce diversity, equity, and inclusion into that process. And the first step I had to do was understand what the process was so that I can influence the process. Evaluate if your organization has mechanisms in place to capture innovation for all employees. And if you are not in a position to be a part of that change, then also look at organizations that are outside of yourself and find who has best practices so that you can share best practices and bring them to your organization. Next one. Along the same lines, Ditu, go back. Along the same lines, evaluate diversity inclusion objectives and how they are integrated into your organization's business objectives. And I'm going to pause there for a brief moment and just say that when I was doing diversity, equity, and inclusion as the champion for the bank where I worked, we had to have a shift. We had to have a paradigm shift, and we had to tie the DEI objectives that we were trying to achieve, and we had to tie them into what are the overall business objectives that we're trying to achieve as an organization, and how can we leverage DEI to meet those goals and objectives. And that's what I do with my current job as well. And then assess the intent on your organizations and monitor diversity and inclusion and the progress of that. And then evaluate the processes to see if there are mechanisms in place to facilitate change in policy or strategy. And for us, where I work today, I had the pleasure of being able to develop our DEI strategic plan. And it's easier to talk about the things that you want to see, the changes that you want to have happen. But when you put together processes that also have the goals and the objectives and the timelines and how you will evaluate the progress, that's when you truly have a plan that's more than just a plan, but it is a roadmap to the success that you want to have. And then I just want to leave you with this too about becoming an advocate. Sometimes becoming an advocate, it means having courage. And we mentioned courage as one of those C words. And for me, you know, as we were going through the racial awakening of 2020, I was not working in my current employer. I was working for another employer. And our CEO happened to be a white, middle-aged, affluent male of privilege. And he decided that he was going to write the Black Lives Matter statement for our organization, but he was going to write it from the lens of his privilege. And that was something that's going to be shared with us as employees and with our community. I advocated that the two African-American individuals that were on the management team of 25 have an opportunity to look at that statement before we made it public. And when I saw it, there were things in that statement that I found to be personally offensive. And so I had to have the courage to be able to approach him and let him know that not only was I offended, but why, and then also provide a solution as to what we could do differently with that statement. So regardless of where we are in our seat on the bus, becoming an advocate means having an understanding of your organizations and how they go about business, and then having the courage to be able to introduce change.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrienne. Excellent point.
Excellent.
And I remember the time and I remember you sharing and having the courage to share passionately. And so this is our last video. This is Carla Harris. This is one of the Friends of Urban Financial Services Coalition, and it's just a 1-minute video. And I'm going to share that video with all of you. And again, this is, one of the reasons why we love to have our technology person, because they just make these videos just happen, right on cue. But here we go. Here's the video from Carla. She's going to wrap up this particular section.
The way that I think we can fix work cultures is that those who are leading have to understand that they have to be a different type of leader than the leaders that led them. You must be an inclusive leader, which means you must solicit people's voices. You must be deliberate and intentional about making sure that you have a diverse team, but more importantly, that you create an environment where people want to contribute and they will give you their best ideas. We are in a fight around innovation everywhere around the globe in every industry. And the only way that you're going to get to the very best ideas that will allow you to lead is to make sure you're getting equity around contribution from all of your people. And I do believe that's the leader's job, to create an environment where that happens. So my big piece of advice to those who are on the leadership seat today is make sure you create that environment and make sure that you train those who are going to follow you to do the same thing. The way that I think we can.
Thank you, Carla. We appreciate you sharing that point. And so we are at the end of our conversation with all of you today. Now, we never end without, some type of action plan. We want you to take action. We did the high level approach. There's only so many things you can do, so much you can do in 2 hours. So one of the things that we encourage you to do is to identify, one of the 6 areas, right, of the traits that you want to develop and take to the next level. Think about any other actions that you can take to embrace, empower, and enable not only yourself, but those in your center of influence. Or if you do have a position of authority, those people that work for you or work with you. You'll get a copy of this PowerPoint. You may want to summarize some of the key initiatives and determine things that you want to take action on. I always like to say, make a commitment to take one action, right? And it's what action can you take in the next 7 days? What resources are needed for you to be able to take that action? One of those resources is the Urban Financial Services Coalition, or when you think about from an organization perspective, could be the L2L Leadership Institute. And then how are you going to measure success? Whatever action that you take, how are you going to know that you won with that action, that you actually made progress? And we talked about the 7 days, that's the time frame. That's what we encourage all of you to do. And then as you try your action, you may not get the results that you want. Revise the plan. Don't give up. Keep moving forward. We have come this far because folks revised the plan, made adjustments, and keep pushing forward. And so we talked about and we identified what diversity and inclusion are, right? And why is it important to business? We pinpointed the characteristics of inclusive leadership. And we talked about the strategies that you can use, right? And we gave you some basis for a plan. So Urban Financial Services Coalition, as an organization, we are here. We are a resource, not only to help financial services organizational government organizations to take advantage of their minority clients, their minority employees, to leverage them, to do things forward. If you as an individual need mentorship, you as an individual want to take your leadership skills to the next level, you can either participate in a role, you can become a part of our Toastmasters Club, you can be involved in developmental opportunities, you can contact Ola, send her a direct message, or anyone on our board. Theodis is our national vice president, or you can contact Jaria Bowman in Kansas City. You can contact any one of us or contact us through the website. the L2L Leadership Institute is also a resource. Adrian, you'd like to share how we can be of value?
Absolutely. Ditu has shared our email address. I'm going right ahead and send an email, but we do provide opportunities to come together on a once a month basis and be able to have a mastermind session. We invite you to be able to be part of that. We have other opportunities that we do throughout the year, and we would welcome all of you to be part of that as well. And then we also have opportunities to bring things like this to your workplace or to provide one-on-one coaching and instruction. So send me an email and then we'll be more than happy to talk about customization for you and your team, because it's not about sameness, it's about equity.
Absolutely, absolutely. So everyone, thank you. We're right at 12:32. Adrian, I know she's going to be sending me a message with 2 minutes over. We'd like to finish on time. Yes. Well, thank you everyone for coming out today. Thank you for being a part of our Empowerment Week with Urban Financial Services Coalition. Ola, you'd like to give any last closing thoughts or remarks?
Yes, I always love the opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for wanting to understand, learn how to be great leaders that you already are. Because like Ditu said earlier, it's just about influence. It's about just standing up and being transparent and saying what needs to be said. You all are all fabulous. I so enjoyed you. Adrian, thank you so much. You know, I have admired you for years, up close and from afar. You all are truly awesome. And my Kansas City team that's here, Jaria Bowman, Madam President of Kansas City, you bring it to the table every time. And I'm so happy. So I can say that I honestly, genuinely enjoyed the presentation. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. It has been a busy week. This is 6 days in a row for me for a conference. So I am zoomed out. Love you guys. And we have to stay engaged and involved in these opportunities with Urban Financial Services Coalition and Lead to Leadership. How are we going to know these things if we don't allow others to share their knowledge with us? I love you all. Continued blessings. Have a great, great weekend. And I will talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Saturday.